Hi, thank you for coming in today. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and what led you to pursue a career in QA?
Sure, I have a degree in computer science and I've always been interested in technology. After graduation, I started working in software development, but I found that I enjoyed the testing and quality assurance aspect of the job more than actually writing the code.
Can you tell me why you enjoy testing and quality assurance more than coding?
Sure, I enjoy testing and quality assurance more than coding because I find it very satisfying to ensure that a product is functioning as expected and meeting the needs of its users. I also enjoy the detective work involved in finding bugs and issues, as well as the challenge of designing and executing tests that cover all necessary areas. Additionally, I appreciate the collaborative nature of testing and quality assurance, as it involves working closely with developers, product managers, and other stakeholders to ensure that the final product is of the highest quality. While I also enjoy coding, I find that my skills and interests are better suited to the QA field.
Can you tell me about your work history and what you've learned from your previous roles?
Absolutely. In my previous roles, I have worked in various QA positions where I have gained experience in testing web applications, mobile applications, and software products in different industries such as finance and healthcare. In these roles, I have learned a lot about the importance of collaboration and communication with cross-functional teams, including developers, product managers, and other stakeholders. One of the key things I've learned is the importance of being detail-oriented and thorough in my testing approach. I have also learned the value of developing test plans and test cases that cover all necessary scenarios, including edge cases and boundary conditions. Another important lesson I've learned is the importance of being adaptable and flexible in the face of changing project requirements or priorities. This has helped me become more comfortable with shifting priorities and changing project timelines. Lastly, I have learned the importance of continuous learning and development in the QA field, which has motivated me to keep up with industry trends and new technologies, and attend relevant training and conferences.
That's great to hear. Can you walk me through your testing process?
Sure. I typically start by reviewing the requirements and making sure that they are clear and complete. Then, I create test cases based on the requirements and prioritize them based on their criticality. After that, I execute the tests and report any bugs I find to the development team. I work closely with the developers to make sure that the bugs are fixed and then retest to verify that the fixes are working properly.
Excellent. Can you tell me about a particularly challenging bug you've had to track down and how you went about solving it?
Sure. In a previous project, we were testing a mobile app and we were experiencing intermittent crashes. It was difficult to reproduce the issue because it only happened occasionally. To solve the problem, I did a deep dive into the code and traced the issue back to a memory leak. Once we fixed the memory leak, the crashes stopped happening.
Good problem-solving skills. How do you prioritize your work when there are competing demands on your time?
I prioritize my work based on the criticality of the issue and the impact it will have on the end user. If there is a critical bug that is preventing users from using the software, that takes priority over other tasks. I also try to communicate with the development team to make sure we're all on the same page about priorities.
Good to hear. Can you tell me about a time when you identified an opportunity for improvement in the QA process and what you did to address it?
Sure. In a previous job, I noticed that we were spending a lot of time manually executing the same tests over and over again. I suggested that we automate those tests using a testing framework, and after some research and testing, we implemented an automation framework that saved us a lot of time and improved the efficiency of our testing process.
Can you explain what test coverage is and how you ensure that your testing covers all necessary areas?
Test coverage refers to the extent to which your testing covers all the necessary areas of the software under test. To ensure that my testing covers all necessary areas, I start by reviewing the requirements and creating test cases based on the requirements. I also work closely with the development team to make sure that I have a good understanding of the software architecture and can identify any potential areas of risk. I also use tools like code coverage analysis to identify any gaps in my testing.
When creating test cases, what factors do you consider to ensure that your testing is effective?
When creating test cases, I consider a number of factors to ensure that my testing is effective. These factors include the functional requirements of the software, the various user scenarios that the software will be used for, and any potential risks associated with the software. I also consider the level of detail that is appropriate for each test case, the priority of the test case, and the level of effort required to execute the test case.
How do you determine the appropriate level of detail for a test case?
The appropriate level of detail for a test case will depend on a number of factors, including the complexity of the software under test, the criticality of the functionality being tested, and the level of risk associated with the functionality. In general, I try to keep my test cases as simple and focused as possible, while still ensuring that they cover all necessary scenarios.
Can you walk me through how you prioritize test cases for execution?
Sure. When prioritizing test cases for execution, I start by identifying any critical functionality that needs to be tested first. I also consider any risks associated with the software and prioritize tests that address those risks. I may also prioritize tests based on the frequency with which certain functionality is used or based on the level of effort required to execute the test.
How do you handle testing for edge cases and boundary conditions?
When testing for edge cases and boundary conditions, I try to identify scenarios that are outside of the normal use case for the software. I may also look at the software requirements to identify any specific edge cases that need to be tested. I then create test cases that cover these scenarios and execute them as part of my overall testing plan.
How do you incorporate risk analysis into your test planning process?
To incorporate risk analysis into my test planning process, I start by identifying any potential risks associated with the software. I may also work with the development team to identify any areas of the software that are particularly complex or prone to errors. I then prioritize my testing based on these risks, focusing on the areas of the software that are most critical or most likely to be problematic.
How do you handle situations where requirements are incomplete or unclear?
When requirements are incomplete or unclear, I try to work closely with the development team to get a better understanding of what is required. I may also perform exploratory testing to identify any potential issues that were not covered by the requirements. In some cases, I may also suggest changes to the requirements to ensure that they are more complete and clear.
Can you describe your experience with exploratory testing and how you incorporate it into your testing process?
Exploratory testing is a type of testing where the tester explores the software without a specific test plan or script. I incorporate exploratory testing into my testing process by performing it alongside my more structured testing activities. I may also use exploratory testing to identify potential issues that were not covered by my existing test cases.
How do you approach testing for different environments, such as testing on different operating systems or devices?
To approach testing for different environments, I first identify the environments that need to be tested. I then create test cases specifically designed for those environments, taking into account any differences in the operating system or device being used. I may also use tools such as virtual machines to simulate different environments for testing.
How do you ensure that your test cases are maintainable and can be easily updated as changes are made to the software?
To ensure that my test cases are maintainable and can be easily updated, I follow best practices such as keeping my test cases modular and reusable. I also make sure that my test cases are well documented and easy to understand, and that they are stored in a central repository that can be easily accessed and updated by myself or other members of the team. Finally, I review and update my test cases on a regular basis to ensure that they remain relevant and effective.
Have you ever experienced conflicts with developers on your team, and if so, how did you resolve them?
Yes, I have experienced conflicts with developers in the past. When this happens, I try to approach the situation calmly and professionally, and I make an effort to understand the developer's perspective and the reasons behind their decisions. I also try to communicate my own perspective clearly and respectfully, and I work collaboratively with the developer to find a solution that meets the needs of both parties. For example, I once had a conflict with a developer who was resistant to incorporating certain test cases into their code because they felt it was unnecessary. To resolve the conflict, I first discussed the situation with the developer and tried to understand their reasoning. I then explained my own perspective and the importance of the test cases, and I worked with the developer to find a compromise that addressed their concerns while also ensuring that the necessary testing was completed. In the end, we were able to reach an agreement that satisfied both of us, and the project was successful as a result.
Have you ever encountered a situation where there wasn't enough time to test all of the necessary test cases, and if so, how did you handle it?
Yes, I have encountered situations where there wasn't enough time to test all of the necessary test cases. When this happens, I first try to prioritize the test cases based on their importance and impact on the overall quality of the product. I also work with the development team and other stakeholders to determine which test cases are the most critical and which can be deferred to a later time. In addition, I may use risk analysis techniques to identify the areas of the product that are the most likely to have issues or defects, and focus my testing efforts on those areas. I also try to make the most of the time available by utilizing automation tools or other methods to streamline the testing process and ensure that I am testing as efficiently as possible. Finally, I make sure to document any test cases that were deferred or not executed due to time constraints, and communicate this information to the development team and other stakeholders. This way, everyone is aware of the potential risks and can work together to prioritize the necessary testing in future releases.
Have you ever encountered a situation where a bug was missed in testing and made it into production, and if so, how did you handle it?
Yes, I have encountered situations where a bug was missed in testing and made it into production. When this happens, the first thing I do is to notify the development team and other stakeholders, including project managers, of the issue. I then work with the development team to investigate the root cause of the problem and identify potential fixes or workarounds. In addition, I work with the team to determine the scope and impact of the bug, and communicate this information to stakeholders. To prevent similar issues from happening in the future, I work with the team to identify any gaps or weaknesses in the testing process, and make recommendations for improving testing procedures or utilizing additional testing tools. I also make sure to document the incident and any lessons learned, and communicate these to the team and stakeholders. Overall, I believe that it's important to approach situations like these with a collaborative and solution-oriented mindset, and to focus on identifying and implementing effective solutions rather than placing blame or pointing fingers.
What skills do you have, and which ones make you stand out from other candidates?
I have a variety of skills that I believe make me a strong candidate for this role. First and foremost, I have a strong understanding of software testing methodologies and processes, including experience with both manual and automated testing tools and frameworks. In addition, I have experience working with cross-functional teams and collaborating with developers and other stakeholders to ensure that products meet quality standards and user requirements. I have strong communication and interpersonal skills, which allow me to effectively communicate complex technical information to non-technical stakeholders and build positive working relationships. Another skill that sets me apart is my attention to detail and ability to identify and document issues and defects. I also have experience with test planning, test case creation, and test execution, which allows me to effectively and efficiently test products and ensure that all necessary scenarios are covered. Finally, I have a strong drive for continuous learning and development, and regularly seek out new opportunities to expand my skills and knowledge in the QA field. I believe that this dedication to self-improvement sets me apart and allows me to stay up to date with industry trends and best practices.
That's great to hear. Thank you for coming in today and sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you for the opportunity to interview.